Yep. I'm Demitrius Nelon. I'm the principal product manager at Microsoft. WinGet is my primary product. The organization I'm part of is really focused on developer scenarios. And I also see a lot of our IT pro folks as developers because many times they're doing just as sophisticated a kind of work. Um, a lot of what I did early on from sort of 2019 through 2022 was really focusing on building a package manager for Windows. And I knew that was a prerequisite to getting into package management and configuration management all up. Microsoft is all in on configuration as code, but this is going to be a very long journey that we go into together. I'm super passionate about that. I've spent time at a lot of other companies like VMware and Verizon and Amazon, and it's always kind of the same scenario of you come in as a new hire, you get issued your device, or you go through this onboarding process, and then it takes a couple of weeks to get everything kind of set up and configured on your device the way you like it. My goal is just to get that down to nothing. So you should be able to start out and either run one command and have your device totally configured the way you like it, or same thing for a project. If you're contributing at GitHub, it should be as simple as create your fork, clone the repository on your local device, run the configuration file, and hit F5. That's really been my vision. So a lot of the work I've been doing lately has been working with PowerShell team, working with other teams inside of Microsoft and outside of Microsoft to get DSC v3 implemented and really kind of share the vision of configuration as code and get everybody going in that same direction. I think, last year, there was a lot of good activity that was going on, getting sort of the first version of DSC v3 kind of built up and going. And this year has really been about progressing, and the 3.1 release of DSC was really focused on a lot of key things that WinGet needed. We've got a lot of great functionality that's available right now, and some new capabilities that have never existed before, like being able to do an export of the device and actually get a listing of every single application, collection of your Windows settings, and for anything that is a v3 resource, also being able to get those settings back out. But there is a lot of complexity in the plumbing. There's a lot of subtle things that kind of have to work right to make all this magic happen. And there's still plenty of big challenges left for us to do, but that's really the journey that I've been on. So is there anything anybody had that they kind of wanted as a pressing leading thing to kick things off and get started, or should I just pick something random, share my screen, and start going to town?
Do you have any questions? If you have any questions, please come to the Q&A area or write them in the chat so that I can read them out. So a quick thumbs up or wave or write in the chat. I think we don't need to let Demitrius explain again what WinGet is. I think we are all on the same page and know that WinGet is the package management in Windows. So you can install, you can, like Demitrius said, you can do a WinGet configure to do some DSC magic on the device, and also do some configuration and so on. Does anyone has any problems or any questions that you want to know from Demitrius?
So I'm actually on a very early build. Whenever the feature team cuts a build, I end up getting, typically on a Tuesday, I'll get a new build of WinGet. And this one is one that we may or may not take public. It just kind of depends on whether there's any bugs or regression or any kind of other instability issues. And then from there, we start flighting out to kind of broader inside of Microsoft to some of the early builds of Windows. And from there, it'll move out to GitHub, and then we'll publish it to Windows Insider Dev and Windows Insider Canary. And then it'll also get published at GitHub so that you can go download and play with kind of early preview bits. We've done a lot of work to shorten that frequency between releases. It used to be, monthly on average, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower. but now we're really aiming for weekly releases to be able to get new functionality into people's hands.
Okay. So I think I will kick off with a question. So or I don't know. So it's not directly WinGet related. It's Windows Store related. But if you can answer this. So if I do, you know the problem about Windows and the bloating of apps. So we did a store app new in Intune, and did an uninstall deployment, for example, on Microsoft Tips, for example, or so, or Microsoft News and so on. And sometimes, without knowledge of us, Microsoft deletes those apps from the store, so that every Intune uninstall tryment errors out with package not found. So, do you have anything to comment on this, or is there any source that we can consume to check out what gets deleted from the store in regards to the built-in apps or so? Do you have anything on this?
So largely the Microsoft Store, which is the MS Store source
Right.
in WinGet,
Yeah.
we're talking to a REST endpoint that's managed by the Microsoft Store team, and they are exposing apps that are free, rated E for everyone, and publicly available. Those are the things that WinGet can directly see.
Yeah.
Occasionally, there are apps that are distributed by the store that end up getting deprecated or made obsolete. I don't get any notifications of that. They just get removed.
Okay.
But if you're looking at, thinking about, hey, we want to be able to uninstall a package like that using WinGet, it's a little bit tricky, but I'll show you some of the details using WinGet list
Mhm.
that we use inside of WinGet. So there's actually quite a bit of complexity when we're trying to correlate an installed package on Windows and an available package where there's a manifest in one of the configured sources. Um, so in this case, if you look at the list, all of these items have MSIX in their prefix. That lets me know these are probably not going to be packages that are correlated to a source. They're just packaged applications installed on the system. And if I scroll up a little bit higher, you'll see kind of this first one where you have this dotted notation. Typically it's publisher.package, and it's got the source connected to it for WinGet. If I go up a little bit higher, I see one that has a version number. That's an indication that there's an upgrade available. I can see this one that is Windows Calculator that has this interesting ID, and it's coming from the Microsoft Store. So what I would expect to happen in a case like this is, let's say if we had Calculator got removed from the store, WinGet would probably still show this ID. And if you tried to use WinGet to uninstall it with this ID, it would fail. But if you take the name
Mhm.
and you use WinGet uninstall and you put quotes around it for that package, if that's the only package that has that name, WinGet will still be able to find it and uninstall it.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, it reverts back to one of these fun long MSIX names. If you pass in WinGet uninstall --ID and use that full name, not the truncated version, it should be able to uninstall the package using that as well. There's
Okay.
also examples of unpackaged applications that are not MSIX, and I'm sure I've got some in here. They're just going to be higher up. There we go. So you'll see some have this ID that starts out with ARP, and then machine x86, and then what looks like a GUID in curly braces. Typically, that's pointing to the uninstall registry key, which is associated with the product code for the application. So even though WinGet didn't install this package, WinGet can actually uninstall this package if you give it the name or if you give it the ID that's associated here.
So and I think if you do it, or if Intune uses your logic to uninstall something and they told us package not found, then I think and quotes, they're doing it wrong, I think, because I think they are using the wrong mechanism to try to uninstall the thing, or I don't know
It's
what logic
possible.
is behind this.
Yeah, so the Intune implementation is fairly sophisticated. If you're really familiar with Intune, you know there's a sidecar agent on each device.
Right.
And what happens
Yeah.
is the Intune server knows how to identify the devices, it knows how to identify the agent on that device, and then it
Yes.
sends commands to the agent.
Mhm.
So the Intune sidecar that's on the device, when it's dealing with the Microsoft Store packages, it's essentially talking to WinGet. It's using the store ID for the application, and it's telling WinGet explicitly to install or upgrade an application based on that ID.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of the stuff that I just described with, you know, things like the product code or the MSIX package family name that's showing up on the device, those are not typical identifiers that Intune and the Microsoft Store are going to know about. That's really something more kind of low level that WinGet understands. When
Mhm.
we look at a lot of our tooling, especially when we start looking like all the way down to the desired state configuration work, you have a large number of layers of functional abstraction involved to be able to get the functionality working.
Mhm.
You know, at Microsoft, we don't want to have 10 different products that all have a whole bunch of the same logical source code in them. So we try to delegate and figure out which team is in the best position to write and maintain the code for certain levels of functionality. And a lot of the work that the Intune team did was integrating with the WinGet COM APIs. And we have both in process sort of you know, packaged application APIs as well as out of process APIs. That's actually how the WinGet PowerShell modules work. And that integration point is what they're leveraging. So if you're finding that applications are being removed from the store and Intune's not able to uninstall them, that's kind of the first time I've heard of that particular problem. But
Mhm.
I've definitely got some contacts in the Intune team, and I'll
Mhm.
follow up with them. I'm going to go ahead and make a note of it now. Uh,
Yeah,
to
so we had that with I think we had today around uh, I think they produce store in inbox store apps that come with the operating system, and then I think they will retire them, and then they will remove them. So what has happened, for example, with the old remote desktop application that was replaced by the Windows app, for example. They will there was a store package that was installing the preview version of this. So we had one customer who was using this, then and then they complained that it was not on the device, and then we saw 10,000 errors because and all told us package not found, package not found, package not found. Then I checked the Windows Store and the package was not there. So and this happens. I think we had this today on another package. I don't know the exact. I think it was news or so, or something that was no longer built in. And then we got these errors in Intune.
Okay.
Yeah, good, perfect. So so what you told us from the view. So if WinGet is on the system, WinGet connects with different sources to know what's on the system, know how to install or to uninstall it, and I think it will also make the connection to a package. So if you identify that that for example VS Code is on the system, then you connect it with your WinGet package. I think in some kind of magic. How does this work, or how do you do this
Correlation.
specific connection? Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. So when you install an application in Windows, you're typically going to have registry keys that get written,
Mhm.
and depending on the nature of the installer and how the installer is built, it's going to write different metadata into the registry. So if I go into, for example, the Windows apps and features, and I look at installed applications, I'm going to see a whole collection of things. So for example, I've got 7-zip installed. And if I go to, the hamburger menu, all I get is an uninstall option. But if I look, I've got this top line that I would call the display name. That's kind of the name of the key in the registry. There's a display version. So in this case, it's the 25.01. Then there's a publisher name and there's an install date. So WinGet is going to be able to go through the registry and it's going to be able to enumerate everything that's listed as an installed app. And that could include something that you installed, separately outside of Windows, things that were kind of built into Windows, and things that were added by the Microsoft Store. WinGet will attempt to grab that metadata and then do some correlation work against all of the configured sources in WinGet. If it's an MSIX package, we might be looking at the package family name. If it's an MSI-based package, we'll probably have a preference on either the product code or the upgrade code. And then for things that are executable installers, either your kind of native.exe installer or Inno or Nullsoft or, whatever, we will attempt to correlate that based on that display name and what's in the package for the package name, or if you've added the apps and features metadata into the manifest, it'll do better correlations that way. So it's really a function of what is the metadata that's in the manifest and how can we correlate that against what's on the device. One of the interesting things to note here with 7-zip, at the end of it, you see in parentheses, it's got the architecture of ARM64. I would expect if I were to install this on an Intel-based or AMD-based processor device, that it would say x64 in parentheses. But WinGet can't necessarily rely on that metadata and the parentheses matching. So largely, WinGet is going to ignore what's in parentheses if it's at the end of the package name. So it's going to attempt to correlate on 7-zip 2501. Some applications will go in their display name. They will put their version the way 7-zip does. That actually makes correlation harder for us because you might have 7-zip 25.00. And if we don't have a manifest that lets us know about that, we have a harder time with correlation. So there are some heuristics that will apply trying to look at the string value that's in display name against what we've got in configured sources. For the community repository, we pull down a SQLite database that is kind of a cache of all the available packages, and we can query that very quickly. For something like the Microsoft Store source or an enterprise REST source, we're going to go hit those REST APIs and we're going to query for that string to try to see if we get any results back out of it. Because there's a lot of different ways that installers can write data to the registry, we may end up with some interesting situations and interesting correlations. Was recently doing some work with Jan de Dobelier on Oh My Posh, having him implement DSC v3 in Oh My Posh, and looking at his releases, he has both MSI and MSIX packaged versions of the application. And on my system right now, I only have the packaged version. So if I do WinGet list Posh, just to try to filter that search down for things that contain that Posh substring, you'll see that it's an MSIX that was installed on my device. There's no source correlated with it yet. Jan doesn't publish the MSIX variations of Oh My Posh in the community repository yet. We're talking about whether or not he wants to go to MSIX only, or if he wants to support kind of a hybrid for a while where it's both the MSI and the MSIX. But I'm going to go ahead and install the MSI just to show you that even though it looks like it's the same application, see if I can, there we go. WinGet's going to go and look at the manifest and it's going to say, hey, what is out there? And it found only one package with that. And you'll see in the installer link or URL there that's blue, it's an MSI. So now if I do WinGet list Posh, you'll see WinGet actually recognizes two different applications that are both named Oh My Posh. So I
Mhm.
have now I'm in an interesting state, and because WinGet knows about one and not the other, interesting things happen.
Oh,
I'm going to show you something a little bit fun. If I do DSC resource list, which is basically asking DSC what resources are on my machine, because I have the MSIX variation installed, if you look at the bottom of the listing here, you'll see there are 3 DSC resources in the MSIX package
I
for
see.
OMA.
Mhm. I see.
And I can do things like export that. So I can do a DSC export. Actually, it's resource, export. I got to move the little sharing
Yeah.
deal over that screen. I'm going to hide that.
Yeah.
And I say, oh, I want to get the shell resource exported from my device. It actually knows that I'm using PowerShell and I'm using the Oh My Posh init PowerShell property. So in theory, it would be able to, handle exporting all of those settings when I run winget configure export. In reality, what's going to happen if I run that now, it'll know that I have the MSI variation installed. The MSI variation does not have the DSC v3 resource built into it, so it can't export my settings. But if I had the MSIX version of Oh My Posh published in the community repository, WinGet, when I run the configure export, would be able to see that. And I'll go ahead and run that. So WinGet will go through, it will basically look to see what are all the installed applications, what are the Windows settings available in the Microsoft.windows.settings PowerShell module, and then any other applications that are installed on my device. It will also go grab those configurations and include those in the configuration file with dependencies. And looking at my kind of list above while this is scrolling by, we've got some WinGet resources. We've got a WinGet create resource. I've actually got a PowerShell resource on here and the Oh My Posh ones. Even though DSC knows about those, WinGet has no way to correlate with them. So the Oh My Posh and the PowerShell settings are not going to be able to be pulled out from the PowerShell profile. Those are things that I'm actively working with teams on to kind of glue in and have this magical experience where not only do I get all my applications out, I get my Windows settings, and I get how everything is configured. And that's really where we want to be, is in a place where I can generate this export. I can use it for things like drift detection, or I can use it as a starting point to modify and build a custom configuration. Uh, and I think kind of thinking about that when we were talking last time, um, at that point in time, we had DevHome in place that had a bunch of interesting things that were leveraging WinGet for running configurations, for getting your device set up. And there
Right.
was a talk about, hey, building these configuration files is hard. Going in and doing YAML by hand, even if you've got something like, VS Code to do the heavy lifting for you, it's still not pretty. So we've actually been doing some work on a new tool that's going to be able to give you kind of a GUI and some more capabilities around WinGet.
Okay, cool. Is there also a something planned for example, if you have VS Code installed, for exporting the VS Code settings, the VS Code extensions, and so on? And
So there is a V2 resource for
okay.
VS Code,
Yeah.
uh, and in DSC, if I do DSC resource list adapter DSC PowerShell. This is a
Mhm.
concept of an adapted resource. So DSC.exe has this adapter for PowerShell, and it knows how to go find what are all of the PowerShell based resources. And you can see I've got the PowerToys configure one in here, and I've got the Windows settings one here. if I do something that does Visual Studio Code, there is a Microsoft Visual Studio Code resource. You can get a different browser tab here.
So if you do a WinGet configure export and you have v2 and v3 adapters installed side by side, this will use the v3 and the v2 modules together, or do I have to do some magic to get that working?
So today, when I do export,
Yeah.
the only V2 resource that is supported is the Microsoft Windows settings.
Okay.
And the other ones, we're still doing some work to figure it out. Things have gotten much more complicated with the hybrid scenario of V2 and V3 resources.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm running sort of the older version of WinGet configuration, the 0.2 schema, that actually knows that everything is supposed to be a PowerShell module as a resource. So it can go through, it can look at the graph of all of the resources in the configuration, can look in the local WinGet path where those modules are placed, and it can go find them and download them from PowerShell Gallery, for example.
Okay.
When I get into this hybrid world where I have V2 and V3 resources both in the same configuration, WinGet doesn't yet have a way to distinguish between a V3 resource and a V2 resource.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're planning on doing there is having schema modifications for WinGet packages to add support for V3 resource and V2 resource mapping, so that we can go then and query and say, okay, I have a configuration file. I see all the resources in it. Let me go look at all the things that are being installed by WinGet. Let me go query the metadata and see if any resources are going to show up because those packages got installed. And then it will know, okay, well, here's the subset of resources that are going to be present because they're getting installed by WinGet. And then here's the remaining resources that we don't know about. And we're going to be able to go then and either look at the PowerShell Gallery, the Microsoft Artifact repository, or any other configured source, whether it's something like a NuGet feed like JFrog or Artifactory, or some other source like an Azure Container Registry, to be able to pull those resources down. But it's much more complex in that hybrid world, and we're focused on not breaking anybody's existing efforts for configuration.
Yeah.
There's a big investment with config as code, and
Yeah,
we want
definitely.
to make sure that whatever we do is going to continue functioning and have backward compatibility as long as we can. We definitely want to move to a world with V3 because of all the magic that V3 gives us. But we know that we're in a kind of a practical state right now where you've got problems today, and there's some functionality that you can use today to get that.
So to get that right, and also for the recording, so if you speak of an adapter and you do Microsoft DSC / PowerShell, so you are, is it kind of right that you are talking to the v5.1 engine and
So for this one,
do a get DSC resource or so?
So for this one, it's doing something like that, but it's doing it with PowerShells, not Windows PowerShell, PowerShell 7. If I
Okay.
wanted to see the Windows PowerShell, those are
I think there is a
different
Windows PowerShell adapter, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Windows PowerShell. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right. So this will show me all of the Windows PowerShell resources, and DSC can talk to all of those.
Okay. Yeah, because if you build a configuration, then you have to do it in the YAML that you want to have the Windows PowerShell and then the resource and then the params that you use for this resource. Then, yeah,
Correct. So
but we will not go into detail, I think.
Yeah, and for the kind of the intermediate work that we're doing, the PS resource get is being updated to have a V3 resource, but it will still need to be able to be installed or bootstrapped first before it can be used by WinGet in a configuration. So right now with V3, if I wanted to, use kind of the latest supported schema that WinGet has, I would actually have to make sure that all of those modules get installed as a part of my configuration before I used them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of the part of where we are today with that, and we're working on making that experience even better and building some tooling that makes it easier to find resources, as well as understanding what are the properties or the settings, so that you understand what the schema is. If I look at a schema from a V3 resource, it's nice and rich and has a lot of metadata in it. See if I can get the syntax right.
So if you, for example, do an export and you have oh my posh, or let's take something that is not installable, but there would be a DSC v3 config. So then you have to add your install logic for the application that you need to configure inside of the YAML file to then configure it with the export. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
So if you look at the last two commands I just ran, the
Mhm.
DSC resource schema for the PowerShell, you get a nice rich schema that's got a lot of good metadata. You're getting kind of the data types, and you're getting a lot of other structural information, as well as some nice descriptive strings that you can actually use and surface in tooling to make it easier to find it. If I look at a V2 resource, the V2 resources don't have the same sort of expressive output, but there is some metadata there that we actually can use to pull into some tooling to be able to show what's happening. And a lot of this complexity is, narrowing down the number of people that are going to be successful going in and doing it. That's why we're looking at building some tooling to make this easier and to be able to surface as much of this information as we can.
Okay. Cool. Nice. So I think there is already, so if you are interested, because we are going far away from WinGet. So if you're interested in anything DSC v3 related, just take a look at the Microsoft documentation. So I think Mike Lombardi and the team did some great work around this, and I think they're also adding soon, or they have added already, a doc how to write a DSC v3 resource, I think. Because I think that's a good tool if you want to have WinGet do your configuration for, to write a DSC v3 resource. I think that's a good tool to have in your tool belt if you want
It
to
is.
configure your machine. Yeah.
And we actually have an open pull request on PowerToys to do a V3 implementation for PowerToys.
Oh, nice.
The WinGet Create tool that we use for building manifests and submitting pull requests to the community repository has a V3 resource implementation that's in C#.
Yeah.
All of the V3 resources in WinGet are also open source, and those are written in C++. And Jan's implementation for Oh My Posh is open source, written in Go.
Oh, yeah.
And then there are examples that the PowerShell team has done in Rust and I believe Python, but I don't remember for sure if that one's already out there open source. And I know Mikey is working on a resource development kit so that we can help developers write idiomatically correct code for their language that expose all of the V3 interfaces.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, so definitely take a look at the V3 documentation on the Microsoft Docs. It's really cool.
Yep.
Good.
And if you're finding any gaps in documentation, feel free to submit issues or
Right.
ask for help. We're definitely kind of pushing out into some new territory here, and it's hard in some cases for us to know what work to prioritize next. So if you've got a real world business scenario that you're after, absolutely reach out, let us know. We're very open to taking that feedback and making sure that we're building the right kinds of products. It's easy for me to think about what I want out of WinGet or configuration and go down that path. But if that doesn't resonate with you as a customer, then I'm kind of wasting my time here.
Yeah, Gijs is doing some great work on the docs team. Mikey has said in the last community call, I think. So he wrote great documentation. So good. So does anyone have any questions around this? What we talked earlier, or has any other questions around WinGet? Or we go on and take another, or I ask another question also. Please come to the Q&A area if you have any questions. No one. Perfect. So, good. You talked about WinGet Create. Is WinGet Create so if you need to create a WinGet package, you use this for do some boilerplating, or what is it about the WinGet Create? Or also is it I think you have already some documentation around it on the docs, I think.
We have a little bit of documentation. So it was
Mhm.
really built as a CI/CD tool to
Okay.
help people build a good, rich manifest
Okay.
and to do CI/CD scenarios for updates. So if I go to, I'll go to PowerToys as an example, and we look at their, where is it?
So it's not for the, so if I want to create a WinGet package and submit something to the repo, WinGet Create is not the right tool for us, or how
It
do
is.
we?
It is.
Okay.
It will.
Okay.
Yeah. For WinGet Create, let me just get a URL to something. Let's do WinGet Create. That's a funny one. Do some inception here. So if I look at the installer URL and I do WinGet Create new and I give it the URL, what it's going to do is it's going to download that installer. It's going to attempt to figure out what kind of a package is this. Is it an MSI? Is it MSIX? Is it Inno or Nullsoft or Wix or whatever? And then it's going to try to help me build a manifest. And I'm just going to pick the defaults here. So it's pulled out the Microsoft Corporation Windows Package Manager Manifest Creator. Oh, that's pretty funny. Let me. I'm just going to do it this way. Microsoft. Just make something up here. And it knows that package already exists. So if I do the same thing again and I do a different name, it will go, okay, yep, there's no existing package ID with that name. It's going to attempt to grab the package version out, and it got 110.3.0. Default to English. We're going to default, and I'm just going through picking defaults here.
So it's like if you do plaster or stucco, so like a it's a bit of what is it, scaffolding tool to creating your manifest file that WinGet knows what to do if you install, if you do WinGet install and so on and so forth.
Right.
Okay.
And so once I get past kind of giving it all those things, it asked me if I want to add some extra locales or if I want to do anything to modify the installer fields. I told it no. And so now it's actually generated a multi-file manifest. So I've got the root manifest here. I've got the installer manifest here. And I've got the default locale file here. If I would have gone and added some other locales, it would have displayed those as well. It did a validation on the manifest. Now, if I tell it no, I don't want to make any changes, it will ask me if I want to submit it to the repository. I'm going to tell it no. But if you tell it yes, it will basically ask you for your GitHub account if it's not in there, so that it can save that information, and then it will actually generate a pull request. So this is how you would use it, as a human being, to go in and try to generate a good manifest.
Okay.
But from an D point of view, something like PowerToys, they actually use WinGet create, and there is a new command that I would use to add a new package, but there's an update command that allows you to do an update, and you can pass in the installer URL, the existing package ID, and it will essentially grab all of the metadata from the earlier version, modify it to the latest version, and generate the PR. So here's a case where when PowerToys does a new release, it will automatically generate the new manifest, and it will create the pull request over at the WinGet packages repository. And this was all inspired by some work that I did with Jan with Oh My Posh. So it should be the same place, GitHub workflows. And then he's got one for WinGet that basically does the exact same thing.
Yeah, but he uses the build PS1 and so on. Okay, nice. Okay, yep. Cool. Okay, so you can use it in a CI/CD scenario. You can use it to locally create a WinGet package. We saw the file. Sam, I will ask you a question. So we have two questions from Sam. I will ask them in at the end of the segment. So we saw the files in the shell. Are these think they are YAML files? Are the YAML files stored somewhere, or do you have to copy them out and do something with them?
So they get created in a directory on your system that maps to the way we would have it at the community repository. So it just sticks it in a manifests directory, and it's in the profile. So if I do cd to manifests, then I can go to W.
Because it starts with a W. Okay, perfect.
Right. So now if I go in here and I do a directory listing, I can actually see the files that were created, so that I could either modify them or, just use them directly. I can actually point WinGet and say, hey, install this thing using a local manifest file, and point at that file to do a test.
But if I see this scenario, so is WinGet also capable of, if we have the exe file directly on the system, that you can package this to a WinGet package, or we have?
We don't have support for something like a local file path or a UNC.
Okay, so you also have to have some kind of a storage account address or a GitHub link or so some kinds of HTTPS path you have to use inside of the manifest.
That's correct.
Okay, good.
So now it's my turn to ask a question.
Yeah.
Looking at kind of what's going on with WinGet create, would you prefer this kind of a command line experience, or would you prefer to have some kind of a GUI that you can go in and see all the fields and edit and all the metadata for the schema and all of that stuff?
So if I look at this and I definitely see it for the first time, so to me it looks a bit strange. So I would expect to have, okay, the package is finished, let's open it in VS Code and do the editing there if I have to edit something, or so it's a bit. So that's only my thing. So if anyone else has anything to add.
Yeah, so you would do something like this. You'd go open it up in VS Code and fiddle with it here.
Yeah, or ask another question. Do you want to open VS Code to edit your package further or so?
Okay.
Is there any if we want to add something to the manifest, is there through the schema, is there IntelliSense available also?
Yes.
Or is then okay.
Yes, we go through. So this one is using the 1.10 schema.
Mhm. Ah, okay. And then, yeah, perfect. So if anyone has to add some feedback to Demetrius, you can give it back. But that's only my thought on doing this. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it looks like there's a couple of questions in chat, or at least one or two there. So
Yes, so we have Sam. Would it be possible to ship PS Resource Get with DSC WinGet or with a Windows update to help adoption and availability of it? That would be the first question.
okay, so my understanding right now is PS Resource Get is part of PowerShell 7,
Right.
and we are looking at having PS Resource Get's DSC resource available to WinGet to be able to use that to install resources that are PowerShell based. So I do expect in the future that WinGet is going to bootstrap that and pull that in. I don't think it's going to ship with DSC. As far as a Windows update goes, until or unless we put PowerShell 7 sort of inbox as part of Windows, I don't think we would pull something like PS Resource Get in. But I do anticipate WinGet is going to want to bootstrap PS Resource Get so that in the world of a v3 configuration, we can start using PS Resource Get to go try to find any modules that are not currently installed on the system when we're running a v3 configuration.
Okay, so you will take care about also if there is a new release that you somewhat keep the PS Resource Get up to date to use the latest features. Then, if you planning to adding it to the WinGet DSC, for example, or
Yeah. So the thought process is, WinGet has some dependencies. It's got a dependency on DSC being bootstrapped. It's got a dependency on the Microsoft Windows settings PowerShell module to grab the Windows settings. And those are things where if we know we're taking a dependency on that, then we're going to go ahead and take the responsibility to bootstrap it.
oh, nice. Okay.
If you go and you install, a fresh Windows install, and you immediately go in and you run winget-v to see what version of winget you have, as long as you have version 1.6 of winget or above in that base image, from the command line, you can just do winget upgrade winget, which will go get you whatever the latest stable version, which today is 1.11.
Right.
Then from 1.11, if you were to attempt to run either configure export, or if you were attempting to run a v3 configuration file, WinGet will go and attempt to bootstrap DSC from the Microsoft Store, and it will attempt to go bootstrap the Microsoft Windows settings resource from the PowerShell gallery. And then once that's done, everything goes from there. We're still dealing with some scenarios where maybe the Microsoft Store is completely blocked, or you're in an air-gapped environment. We're working through what it would look like to be able to bootstrap that from either the community repository or a private source to try to cut some of that friction down and make it a little more seamless. But those are definitely areas that I've been looking into.
Yeah. So Sam already lost your answer. So he is asking, is that on the roadmap? And like me, he didn't. He and me didn't really expect the Windows update path.
Yeah. So, one of the other things that I've been looking at has been what it would look like for WinGet to be able to handle Windows updates. So that would kind of be my next question is, if WinGet could do something like that, is that something that you would be interested in? Or would you rather not have WinGet able to go in and do Windows updates and just stick with the other existing mechanisms?
So I have my opinion, but if anyone wants to talk around this, just come to the Q&A area and or write in the chat. So my thought is if you configure a machine and you maybe it would be great to have the patch level of the previous machine on the in the config. So that WinGet, for example, can say, okay, I have a machine with a different patch level. I will bring that to that patch level to not disrupt the config, because if you have a different patch level, then some bad things can happen. So
Yeah.
that would be some kind of my tip. And then WinGet has to check, okay, I have to install this and this KB to bring that to this patch level.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking at when we did the very first version of configuration with WinGet.
Yeah.
There had never before been this notion of doing an assertion in
Yeah.
a configuration that was basically something like, oh, hey, I require minimum version whatever of Windows 11.
Mm.
But I don't want to change the device and I don't want to do updates. I just want to kind of fail out and inform the user. That's a very different use case from, hey, this device needs to be on this patch level.
Yeah.
Make it so.
Yeah.
And there is an experimental feature in WinGet.
Okay.
That is called resume.
Okay.
And the intent of resume is I'm running some WinGet command, whether that is upgrade all or whether that's a configuration or some future where WinGet could do Windows updates. The idea is you may need to do a reboot, and then after the reboot, it might not be done. There may be more work to go do. So in that example we talked about where I need to get Windows updated to some patch level, and then after that patch level is there, then go ahead and take some other actions. The idea is that if you do this resume, if you have that enabled, and you run a WinGet command, it gets recorded on the system that that's what you were asking WinGet to do. You'll get the reboot. You'll go through the reboot. When you log back in,
Yeah.
WinGet will just pick up where it left off, and it will continue on with the rest of the configuration so that you don't have to remember or reinitiate that full command all over again.
Okay, so that's something what Windows workflow, what PowerShell workflows were doing in the PowerShell 5 days. Nice. Okay. Yeah. I built that thing myself because I had to set up a Windows server or configure everything. I had to restart because I had to install Hyper-V. And then I did my own mechanism where I write the last step where I was in the registry. Then I write myself in the run once, reboot the server, and then the script was there, ask for the registry key, and then continued on the same step. So, yeah, very helpful. Sam said, haven't really thought about that, but no immediate objections. But one tool to handle it all could have its benefits. So I think so also. Let's go to Sam's second question. Do any orgs use the WinGet client with their own private repos?
There are a lot of them. So there's a few third-party offerings out there. I'm not gonna be able to remember them all, but I know Nerd.io supports private REST sources. WinGet.pro supports private REST sources, and there are several other open source implementations of the WinGet REST protocols. So there's a bunch of organizations that are using private REST sources. I don't know how many are using any of them. Like I do have a bunch of telemetry data that is built into the product, but that is purely so that I know that WinGet is functioning correctly. I have no idea how many unique different REST sources are out there or what's being used. I know we did a lot of work in the WinGet REST source, the reference implementation that we have that runs on Azure. We just recently shipped the PowerShell module for that to the PowerShell gallery to make it easier to deploy those sources and to manage them, which is going to lead into my next question of, would you want some kind of a tool or some kind of a UI to manage a private REST source?
Because
or is
at the
that something
moment,
that you would want to do like a bunch of your own scripting?
So at the moment, we can ask, I think, through the PowerShell commandlet or through WinGet, what packages are at a specific source, correct? So
That's correct.
So I think it would definitely be helpful to have some kind of this, so some kind of the NuGet gallery, for example, or what we are seeing now at the as a PowerShell gallery to have as a front end. So
Yeah.
that would
So
be my
in the
first objection. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the REST source module, we've got commandlets for deploying the REST source. We've got commandlets for adding manifests to the REST source, for deleting them, and for modifying them.
Okay.
And
Okay,
so
but I think it would be it would be great to have some kind of a NuGet style stuff to have if a REST source is available, to have some kind of a website where we can check out or upload or get some tokens for uploading the packages and so on.
Okay.
And I think we when we last saw us, I think it was on PSConf.eu. You talked about to make the REST source more, say, like smaller or more affordable, because at the moment we have a REST source that needs a Cosmos DB and so on and so forth. Is there any investments in this, or are there any planned investments in doing this?
Right now, that's not one of our high priorities.
Okay.
I've got the way I describe it to a lot of people is I've got 1,000 plates spinning all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm always looking at, what is the next most important thing to go do that's going to kind of have the biggest impact, help the largest number of customers.
Yeah.
A lightweight source is definitely something I would like to have. It's just not at a point where it's high enough in priority. There haven't been that many people that have made too much noise about it. And if you do some digging, the odds are you'll find a lightweight one that'll meet your needs, at least for the short term. The community has got an open source one based on a Docker container. I haven't played with it, but I've heard a handful of customers are using that one and they like it. It makes it super easy to build a small portable REST source on a container, and then basically you can bring that image into an air-gapped environment or just deploy it on any device and then run it from there.
Yeah, but that would be my next question. So that's your implementation is based on Azure. And I think you are not able to. Yeah, you could use it. No, I don't know exactly. I think you can't use it on Azure Local, but and you are not able to play with private endpoints or so either. So I think that's not able to run in air-gapped scenarios. Correct?
I don't know. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to reach out to the Azure Arc Jumpstart team and see if they know if there's a way to be able to run that logically, kind of with the hybrid mode.
Yeah, because I'm not so sure if you can run Cosmos DB on Azure Local. So if you can run Cosmos DB on Azure Local, I think then it's possible. Yeah. Okay. Good. What do we have? Okay, so this one. Yeah, because I think at the moment it only makes sense for customers that want to have hundreds of packages or so to have as an internal thing. What is I saw this feature, direct MSI installation. What is this about?
That's actually very old. We were running into some interesting challenges when we go to install an MSI application. One of the interesting things in Windows is the Windows update can actually interrupt the MSI exec installer application. If, let's say you're in the middle of installing something and a Windows update gets triggered at the same time. Your MSI installation can get paused because only one MSI can be installed at a time. And the OS does its thing, and then your installer kind of picks up again. One of the challenges we ran into is some of the installers are doing their own timeout to determine a failure. And even though they might succeed, if a Windows update interrupts that flow, they might time out and fail and error out. There were some other sort of bits and pieces of different Windows internals on different versions of the OS. It ended up being something that we really haven't continued to invest in, but I haven't really had any reason to go rip it out of here. I think there's been one or two cases where somebody was able to get a little bit of benefit out of it being there. It was just something that we were exploring. One of the things I'd really like to be able to get to is doing parallel installations and parallel downloads, so that if you have, for example, a configuration file that's going to install 15 different packages on your system, it would be nice to be able to understand that lifecycle in a configuration. And WinGet can do that if it's orchestrating the configuration, where
Yeah.
we could basically say, hey, these 15 things need to be installed. There's no dependency sequencing on any of them. Let me just go start downloading all of them now. Whichever one gets downloaded first, let me start installing it. And we know that it's only safe to do one portable executable installer or one MSI at a time. But MSIX is different. I can actually do up to 6 MSIX installs in parallel. So I want to build some of that logic in to be able to do things in parallel and a little bit smarter. And the direct MSI installation might end up getting used in that flow, but we're still not sure yet.
Okay. So this is a feature, because you said it's very old, will be removed out of the thing, or?
If we don't use it for the performance of doing parallel install, it'll probably get removed.
Okay. And I think I asked last time, what about the font stuff?
Oh,
Because
we've
got
actually made quite a bit of progress on fonts.
Oh, nice. Okay.
We've got an engineer working on that. Fonts are shockingly complex. You've got system installed fonts. You've got user installed fonts. You've got fonts that can get installed by an application for a user. And
oh my God.
a lot of the code that's in Windows for fonts is quite old and complex.
Yeah.
So the work we've been doing there is to be able to support user-based font install, device-wide based font install, and to be able to do upgrades on those. And we're going to do them in a different source. So there's going to be a font source. And the reason for that is we're not expecting that many people need or want to install fonts or have them upgraded all the time. So we don't want to have all of the metadata for that font source downloaded at the same speed or frequency that we do for packages. There's been a small number of people that have been very vocal about fonts, and that's really something that they do with their sort of daily activities. So we'll have the settings so that they can set the time to live on the cache for fonts smaller to get kind of the performance and the frequency of updates that they need. But we don't want to necessarily download all of that stuff with all of the packages every time that the package index gets updated. We're also looking at some different flows for, specifically doing a font command and being able to do like font list or font upgrade, as opposed to where you just do like WinGet upgrade all, and you're just upgrading all of your packages. We're probably going to have an option to be able to go in and say, hey, when I do, all of my package upgrades, if there happens to be an upgrade for one of the WinGet installed fonts, do that too. But if WinGet hasn't installed any fonts, then it's probably not even going to try to go check that index and pull that in. I think the two fonts that we're looking at right now are Cascadia Cove, Nerd Font, and kind of the Nerd fonts all up, as well as one of the accessibility fonts from Microsoft. So those will be the first two I expect to show up in the font source. And we're going to put fonts in a separate directory at WinGet packages so that we can avoid sort of bloating the index of packages with fonts, so that we can kind of treat them discreetly and make sure that we're being network efficient as much as possible.
So and I think you will also make this a exportable thing from the beginning. So if you do WinGet config export, that these fonts will also be in the export YAML that you can install it from the catalog, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's very helpful. So that is my pain point. So if you have to onboard a new colleague or try or want to show him or her the nerd fonts and so, and I have to tell you, you have to go to this then, and then you have to install your 500 fonts, and then you have to choose something, and then blah blah blah. They say, okay, I have to go, and it's not interesting enough. So it would be definitely a good thing to have this as a dependency where I can configure and download the font directly with WinGet. Yeah.
Yep. And if you look at the WinGet font list here,
Nice.
there are hundreds of fonts that are in Windows and available to the user depending on what programs are installed.
Yeah.
And so, this is one of those things where if I were to do just a regular WinGet list and list all the applications and all of the fonts that are installed, it would be super complex. And we don't want to break anything else that's out there. So we don't really want to make it super easy to go in and overwrite or uninstall fonts that were installed by applications. We're trying to, be cautious about how that happens. And one of the interesting things that we've been looking at is if you look at the resource list for what's in Oh My Posh, Jan has actually implemented his own code in his own resource to grab the Posh configuration, to grab any fonts that were installed by Oh My Posh, as well as the shell. And I've also got the PowerShell profile resource installed on my system right now. So if I do DSC resource export, and I do the one for
PowerShell/profile.
PowerShell profile. That's basically going to spit out everything that is in all of the different places that I have my profile. So you'll notice at the very beginning of mine, the first thing that it's going to do is the Oh My Posh init PowerShell. So when we have more than one resource that's logically doing the same thing, I want to go through and make sure that in our export and in our subsequent configure flows that we're not kind of stepping on each other. So it's possible that you might have used Oh My Posh to install your nerd font, and Oh My Posh would be able to export that for you. But WinGet, on the other hand, is probably not going to try to export all 300 fonts, nor is it going to try to export fonts that were installed by applications, because that could be nonsensical on a device if you wanted to go configure it.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of looking at making sure that the things that get exported by WinGet for the fonts is going to default to just the fonts that were installed by WinGet.
Yeah.
I expect we'll need to have extra parameters and settings and control so that if you really did want to export all of the installed fonts, we would be able to do that.
But that's interesting. How does Oh My Posh install fonts? That's
Jan implemented his own code for that. So if I do, if I do Oh My Posh,
okay, nice. I was not aware of this. Yeah, nice. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, and then you can and then you can say what font do you want? Okay, nice. That's cool. Okay, nice. Learn something new. Nice. Cool. Okay, so the fonts. Okay. So but you don't have an ETA on when it will be GA, I think. So
we are actually aiming for fonts to go GA in the 1.12 release of WinGet on the last Tuesday in October.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So after Minicon then. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we will probably not allow the community to submit any new fonts for a few weeks, because we want to allow WinGet enough time to kind of roll out on all the devices that are out there, And then once we feel confident that most people have upgraded to that latest version of WinGet, if we haven't had any, serious bugs reported or anything like that, then we'll begin the process of allowing the community submission of fonts.
Mhm.
And it will be very similar to the way applications are handled. Somebody will submit a PR, will require that they have the font type
Mhm.
in that pull request to go into the fonts directory. And then we'll do the static analysis, the dynamic analysis, where we'll install the font and check everything and make sure that it's good before that comes back for a community moderator to approve it. And we will not allow people to add the installer type of font to the community repository where packages go. And I know there's at least 1 or 2 instances where people have done a zip file that has fonts in it so that they can do some install through that mechanism. And we'll work to get those migrated over to the font source.
Okay. So, if you do a WinGet create, is that the same? So this will then be the same mechanism to create a font package with WinGet create. Is that correct? Or
That is correct. So
okay, okay.
part of the work so fonts is a massive feature.
Mhm.
You're looking at the kind of the functionality that goes into the WinGet CLI. You're looking
Mhm.
at the WinGet YAML manifest schema change, the WinGet REST source JSON schema change. Then we're looking at the code that we have to do on the validation side and the code we have to do on the publishing side to publish another source, group policy to allow enterprises to block the font source, and then WinGet create to be able to understand how to create a manifest for a font. So there's a whole big surface area
Mhm.
where we have to go kind of across a bunch of different things to do all of that work to be able to fully enable support for fonts.
Totally understand. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that would be a big milestone to have this built in WinGet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been one of the top features, if not
Mhm.
the top feature at GitHub for several years. It only recently was surpassed by, um, the complaint of, hey, I have WinGet installed something, and then when I immediately try to run it, it doesn't work. Um, there were there were actually changes made in the OS that if you do that using the command executable rather than PowerShell, if I do it in like cmd.exe in conhost,
Mm.
um, the WinGet command is known by the registry by the console host to basically refresh the environment path variable if something was either prepended or appended to the path during that invocation.
Mhm.
The PowerShell team is actually working on doing the same kind of a thing in PowerShell 7, but not in Windows PowerShell.
Mhm.
So that if you use WinGet through the CLI in PowerShell, it will refresh the path. And then we'll look at doing the same kind of a thing in the WinGet commandlets so that I can actually install something and then immediately use it right after I've installed it without having to refresh those environment variables myself. I
Okay.
think the next top one is showing the path. And I'll show you how I look at the priority of these things.
Mhm.
If I go to the WinGet CLI and I pull up the issues and I sort by the thumbs up,
Mhm.
this tells me this is what the community wants done the most.
Mhm.
And fonts, which is now number 3, was at the top for a very long time. I think that, the thumbs up on that has slowed down since we've been implementing it.
Mhm.
Um, and then number 2, the display the path to an installed package. That one's pretty useful not only for people to look and see where something is installed, but it's also going to be interesting when we look at the export scenario. There are going to be some people that are going to say, hey, I like the fact that I've got something installed on a different path. It might be because they have an SSD that they want the OS on and they want their applications on a separate sort of a spinning magnetic disk type drive or something else. And we're going to have to reason through, do we need to preserve those paths or not? Which means, do we need to check and see if those drives exist? Um, and it also helps with some applications just get installed in interesting ways. Like you might try to install something for a user. They might actually stick it in program files and have you do a UAC prompt for that. even though the registry key is in HK CU versus HKLM. So there's a bunch of interesting installer behaviors out there. The next one that I think we're probably going to tackle in the next release, aiming for February, is enhancements to the list command, so that we can treat things like source as a filter. So if you do, today, if I do like WinGet source or WinGet list -s WinGet, for example, a lot of people will think, oh, hey, I'm only going to see the packages that are in the WinGet source. Unfortunately, that's not what it's doing. You end up getting everything, and then you only see the things that are correlated with the WinGet source with available updates. So we're gonna modify that so that it behaves the way you would expect, so that you can see these are the packages in the WinGet source, these are the ones in the Microsoft Store source, and then if you just do the default WinGet list, you'll see everything. And I think there are some other enhancements that were put in there, so all of these particular issues, and I think that's why this one got thumbs up, is the usability stuff.
I was answering a question that is the 98 thumbs up. The apps installed should optionally auto update. I was asking this if it's possible to say, for example, okay, 7-zip, you can auto upgrade when there is a new version available, because it's not you should have the newest version, but it's not so critical for the user that if this auto upgrades, then everything crashes or so. But it could be useful. So that's also a cool thing that this is at a bit higher priority.
Yeah. So one of the challenges with this one is WinGet doesn't run like a service. It's only running when the user invokes it. So if we switch to a mode where we act more like a service, or offer, an optional service component to do something like that, we start getting into security challenges, because services are going to require elevation to be installed, which is a challenge for us being a packaged application. It also increases the usage of bandwidth for how frequently the index cache needs to be downloaded to the device to see if there is an upgrade available for that particular package. So there's a lot of complexity around that one that we're looking at. I know there's like a WinGet auto updater that the community has built that is basically a service that does exactly that.
Okay.
And we've been looking at some of the tooling that we're building to decide, maybe there is something for a separate option for, having an application that runs a service. I know UniGet UI by default will install and register a service that will check automatically for updates to everything you want it to check for. And I'm sure there's a lot of people using that feature and love that as well. So, this is definitely one that is working its way up, but it's going to require a lot of intentional design work.
Yeah. Especially if you have such a big tool to not break anything else. That's it's not the easiest. Yeah. I totally understand. Okay, nice. Okay. And if you install a new release of Windows 11, is there still the problem where WinGet is not functioning at the first place, so that you have to download the module and run, I think, repair WinGet or so, or what's the command that is? Is it still the case?
I think in the latest,
So in 24H2, so we are talking 24H2.
Yeah, I think in 24H2 there is a recent enough version of WinGet on there. It's newer than 1.6.
Okay.
You can just run WinGet upgrade WinGet.
Okay.
And that will get you the latest version, and then from there you can go do everything. We had a bunch of work to make sure that, since we're a store delivered app, that we get kind of registered very quickly. That helps to eliminate that problem where WinGet isn't even available for like the first 10 or 15 minutes after you log in, because the store was having to kind of go fetch and install WinGet. So we worked on eliminating the time gap that's there. The last time I did a fresh install, I'm trying to remember if it was on a Microsoft DevBox or if it was an Azure VM, but I had, a fresh install, and it was like WinGet 1.9 that was on there. And and that was the first thing I did is I just immediately went into terminal, and I did WinGet-V to see what version was there. And then I did WinGet upgrade WinGet, and then I did WinGet up configure, and I did my configuration file. So, thinking in terms of kind of like a .files thing. So I've got this setup project. Clint Rutkus has one as well. But basically, I'll go into this, I'll hit raw, and I'll do
Okay. Then WinGet
configure, and then I'll do Control V, and I'll just let that go and run and install everything on my system. And the other thing that this one is doing, I actually am using the storage DSC resource. I actually partition a 100 gig depth drive on the device as part of it. So, at Microsoft, I'm always getting kind of new hardware or a new version of Windows I have to test out. And it's a real headache to go through and set everything up. So this is the default setup that I go through right now. And you'll notice this is the older V2 configuration. I have started to play with a V3 configuration that came from an export of this preview of WinGet, so that I can start going through and reasoning about how all of this stuff happens. But the main reason I don't run this one is there could be resources that are not available, like that storage resource, without me installing it. And I don't want to go through and use the script resource as kind of a hack to install it. I'm waiting for the PowerShell team to release PS resource get.
Okay.
And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my configuration install PowerShell 7. And then I'm going to have a dependency of after PowerShell 7 is installed, I'll use the PS resource get resource to install the PowerShell module for disk, and then I'll have that do the configuration of the depth drive.
Oh, nice. I was not aware that you can do it with the storage DSC resource. That's nice. Yeah, because I use it on my computer also, but I don't have to reinstall it every week or so. I don't know what the cadence is at your side, but it's definitely, I think, if you have one install once a month or so, then it's definitely a useful thing to have this config, and then you can start working. Yeah, that's cool.
Yep. And the V3 resources are substantially faster than the V2 resources, because you're not having to kind of spin up that whole PowerShell process with the .NET runtime and all of those other things. So that's another one of the real big benefits of moving to DSC V3.
Nice. And I think on server 2025, we don't have the problem with an old WinGet, because I think it will released with when it was packaged, I think it was a current enough WinGet to function correctly, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And on server 25, it's not updated through the store. It's actually updated through the Windows updates.
Okay. So on clients, there is no Windows update. It is store if it's not blocked, and on the server it's Windows update. So it's a difference. Okay.
Yes, and I'm doing the sort of the investigations and the work now. I want to be able to have WinGet upgraded through the Windows update mechanism on the client devices. That way, when you're going through and you're doing a Windows update, you'll automatically get whatever the latest version of WinGet is if you didn't already have it. That way, when you're going through sort of the Windows install experience, and it does the Windows upgrade as kind of part of that UBI flow, UBI is like out of box experience. We'll go through and make sure that whatever the latest Windows update gets applied, and that will also have the result of being able to bring WinGet in and have it be a late stable version.
Yeah, if it's not deleted, disabled by the Windows Update for Business policy. So,
Yep.
but yeah, that would be also good, because we are working with 4 or 5 customers at the moment to make them Enter ID only. So we have to design a new client, and every client says disable the store because we want to have store app new. So we want to control what software the user installs through the store, which kind of makes sense. But you have to check the tick by so you don't have access to the store, but if you have installed something to the store, update it with the store.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing. What we had a customer where the setting wasn't set, and then they ended up with some old, very, very old store apps, and that was not the best experience. Like, let's put it like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some people think, or my software packaging team, for example, think that the Windows Store is bad because all the software that's on it has an old version. Because if you have, for example, Spotify and so on through the store, and Spotify retires the thing, then it stays at that version, but they will have your MSI at their side to download. And if you rely on updating it or installing it from the store, you will never get the current version. And that's what but you can install it with WinGet, correct? Yeah. But if you rely, so in the earlier days when WinGet was not there, you have to rely on the store, and that's a problem. And for them the store is bad because it's old software. I don't know if that's correct. I'm doubting.
Yeah, it really depends on the frequency that the publisher pushes updates into the Microsoft Store.
And it's not the best experience to publish on the store. It's can be a bit difficult, I think. Yeah. So
yeah, I know they have a CLI now for the store that is designed to make it a little bit easier for CI/CD style publishing. I would also like to get a verified developer flow, so that if somebody was worried about the community repository, that we would have at least this notion of it is the verified developer that submitted this manifest and that is managing these updates to try to keep things more current. We're doing some work right now to offer that functionality for all of the first-party packages or all of the Microsoft packages that are in the WinGet community repository, so that we can actually get more teams at Microsoft publishing their apps through the community and have them labeled as verified developer. And if we get that flow working well, and that drives a little bit of impact, and customers feel like, hey, this is much better being able to have the verified developer, then I will be able to go start doing the work to partner with Partner Center and the Microsoft Store team to try to figure out a way to improve that publishing experience and have verified third-party developers or ISVs, whether it's open source or commercial, either one.
Yeah, but it's always good to have, because WinGet now has, I don't know how much software without the versions you have at the moment. Yeah, that's because there is a tool that we are looking at buying. That's called, I think I told you at the PSConf, it's RoboPack, it's called, and it uses also WinGet as a store so they have 40,000 plus applications in their catalog, and they're using one of their sources is WinGet. So if you search, for example, SAP or so, you will find the WinGet package for SAP inside of there. and then they will test it on their own data center or in their own machine to test if it works. They will verify it as that is a verified package with row pack, and then you can build it inside of the PowerShell app deployment toolkit to then put it into Intune and install it through there. So that's cool that the row pack, for example, is using WinGet as a trusted source because they are using the packages to trust them because they validate that the WinGet install works, and then we can trust this as customers or as customers of WinGet that the software package is indeed a package that we can trust because it's a community repository at the end, so everyone can publish anything, and you don't know if it works correctly or not. So if you have this process where you can trust this through a vendor, it's a great thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I don't think that you are going to spin up 10,000 VMs to check if the thing is working and then saying, okay, it works, and then you shut the thing down and so on. I don't know.
So when we do validation, when a PR comes in, we actually do install the package and attempt to launch the package during our validation process.
Okay, so you do something like this. Okay.
And, there's a lot of work that we do during validation, and there's a lot more that I'm looking at doing. We're in the process right now. The current mechanism is a GitHub webhook into Azure DevOps, and it's an Azure DevOps pipeline to do the validation work. We're actually migrating over to a new GitHub app that allows us to do a little more fine-grained control, gives us some slightly higher rate limits for messaging to developers to be able to expose failure conditions and errors and other things directly on the pull request, rather than having to, click a link to go into ADO and then click into some other artifact links and things like that to be able to get the log files out. But all of that is available for people to go dig into if they're curious. You can kind of see that on every pull request that gets submitted to the repository, and you'll actually be able to see all of the scans and all of the checks that we do, at least at a high level, for malware scanning and policy scanning and install results and the file watcher. There's a lot of stuff going on in there.
Okay, so you are testing at least when the software is being pushed at the first time, or if it installs correctly. Okay.
Yeah, and we do require it to be able to do an unattended, not necessarily fully silent. We default to silent with progress. So the installer can launch some UI. But as long as the user doesn't have to click, next or finish or done or anything like that, then we'll let it in. But if there's any blocking behavior that requires user interaction, then we will not allow it into the community repository, because we know a lot of people are doing automation type work.
Yeah. That's definitely the thing. Yeah. We had that at a customer. They installed with DSM or Enteo or NetInstall or whatever this tool was called, and this was marked as a manual install. So they package you the application, and you can you then have a PDF, and then you can click through this. So that's definitely not the target of WinGet. I understand correctly. Or definitely full. Okay, good. So then we have some kind of trust that is inside of the repository that this is indeed working, or so.
Yeah. So we know when we get a pull request, we go through, we do static analysis detection for malware, we do dynamic analysis detection for malware at install time, and we do it at runtime.
Okay.
The reality is there might be a 0-day, unknown detection that's there. Typically, if there is a new detection that shows up for an application that was submitted within the first week, we'll get a notification that is basically, hey, one of the things you recently attempted to validate now has a detection.
Mhm.
Most of the time they were already blocked at submission.
Mhm.
If there is that rare example where something got into the repository, but we got a notification, we will immediately remove it.
Mhm.
Our policy is remove and ask questions later. Typically what will happen is somebody will ask questions or they'll try to re-add it. And then when they try to re-add it, it will get blocked for malware. And then we're able to report on which AV vendor it was and what particular type of a detection it was. Most of the time, honestly, they're false positives. Um,
Okay. Okay.
and so, it's kind of sad hey, we ripped something out of the repository that somebody added because there was a detection. And then we find out after the fact it was a false positive. And then it can be re-added back again. And then over time, we periodically go through and rescan every single package in the repository so that we can make sure that there aren't any new detections.
Okay.
That is also part of some future work I'm looking at where I want to pull in CVE metadata.
Mm. Mhm.
We know when a package is submitted, whether or not there's any CVEs at that point in time.
Mhm.
And if there is a critical CVE or a high CVE, we block that. We don't let it in. If it's a medium or a low risk, we will still allow it in. What I want to be able to start doing is recording that CVE metadata in the manifest. You would not see it in the pull request. It wouldn't be there at GitHub, but it would be in the merged manifest that's on blob storage that the index is pointing to, so that you could do things like, hey, WinGet, tell me everything that's got a CVE that's installed on my system, or hey, is the latest version available at WinGet containing a CVE? And then we'll start thinking about, would you want to roll back to an earlier version of something that doesn't have a CVE, or would you want to just uninstall everything that has a CVE? Different companies will have different restrictions and policies on that. And then the benefit of that periodic rescanning, in addition to the malware detection aspect of it, would also be CVE related reporting so that we could go in and update that metadata on manifest as well.
Mhm. 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 I think one of the last questions, because I think we only have 15 minutes, um, is there a plan to put it? Is there a plan to package a whole DSC workflow? Because at the moment we don't have anything that we can to add to a install. So, for example, we install a software and then we need to have some editing of a file or do need to copy some other files and put them somewhere else to make the app function correctly. So, for example, if you take a VPN client and you need to have a VPN file that needs to be copied from somewhere else and put in the installation folder, or you have to, for example, do some kind of monitoring agent and you add a config file, then you have to restart a service or so. Will there be a routine, for example, to be able to package a DSC resource to make that a DSC config, to make that a WinGet package? Or
So that's another one of those interesting areas. One of the things we run into, and I think SQL Server was the first one that kind of showed up, where it's a really sophisticated thing to install, and having a configuration file to define how you want it to be installed is quite useful.
yeah.
But we knew that we weren't realistically going to be able to host all of the interesting variations of config files that people would want to use.
Mhm.
We thought about some kind of an argument where you could say, WinGet install this package, dash dash config file blah.
Mhm.
Or if one was required, it would prompt you to give it the path to that configuration file. Um, that also hasn't really been something that's been marked as high priority by the community.
Mhm.
Um, when you throw out the idea of, hey, would WinGet have this mechanism to be able to do an install and use kind of the DSC interface for configuration? I think in the world of V3, you could certainly have the notion of an adapter, where you could say, hey, I happen to know the syntax of the configuration file, or I know what the configuration file I want looks like. I'm going to have an adapter resource so that I can use configuration through WinGet or through DSC to do that. That's an interesting idea. I haven't really had any time to think about that one.
Mm-hmm.
You're the first person to kind of bring that up in that way. I don't think it would be a, WinGet install blah kind of a thing. I think it would really be a WinGet configure.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe some argument where we say, -- package so that we know the package ID that you want, and then -- resource to say, hey, and I want you to use this resource, and then maybe some argument for the parameters, but I'd love to hear kind of more about that scenario and, any specific example that you've got to see if there is something that makes sense in that kind of a flow as opposed to a full configuration file. A lot of what we,
Sorry.
A lot of what we build are low-level building blocks to enable the functionality, and then we, build higher order constructs on top of it.
Yeah, so because at the moment when we do application packaging, we use PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit, and with PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit, you can control the whole install flow and what is happening post-install and pre-install and so on. So you can say, okay, in pre-install, I want to have this folder structure created, then I want to install my software, and then I want to have a file that's coming from another source to have to be placed in this folder, and then you open the app, and the app depends on this folder that is created before and consumes that file or so, and then it will do something with the file. So that's the thing that we, for example, if you have a VPN client, or SAP is also a cool example for this. So you can configure SAP in the registry, or you can configure SAP with XML files to have SAP the known say it locations or SAP stuff that you have at your customer. You have to give them the XML structure for this, or the XML file that SAP will put this up. And if I do WinGet install SAP, yeah, I have SAP on that, but it's not configured. And so you have to do some, for example, then you have to do some proactive remediation in WinGet, or you have to have some mechanism to do a post install or a post task that if you check that WinGet is installed, then you have to add your files and so on. That can be very tedious if you have something like this, for example. So if you want to configure a software that WinGet is installing, you always have to check, is it installed, and then you have to do some post stuff. So that's my thought or my example on this. So maybe
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the scenario and what might make sense. I could imagine, WinGet configure -- package SAP, -- resource, whatever resource you want, -- file or whatever, to do that as sort of more of an atomic operation. And that way WinGet would do the work to ensure that it was installed before you tried to go apply that configuration.
So would it be good to, I don't know, so I think I don't do it today because it's already 9:00 p.m. today. But if I do it on the weekend, that I open a discussion in your GitHub repo to give you an example, and then we can discuss or think about it and so on.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, good. I will write that down on my side that I write something down. Nice. Okay, good. I think, Dimitrius, do you have any questions from your side, or do you have any every feedback that you needed?
So I think I got answers to all of the questions that I had. I'll share a little bit. I'm looking over at my marker board. I'm starting now to look at my February release. I think I really want to focus on sort of some quality of life improvements for WinGet and some bug fixes. So the first one, if I do, let me clear my screen for you.
Mhm.
If I do WinGet install PowerToys,
Mhm.
what ends up happening here is I get two different results that look like the best match. I get one from the Microsoft Store and I get one from the community repository.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
You know, these
Mhm.
are both the exact same application.
Mhm. Okay.
I want to add some logic where I can go look at the hashes of the installers for those best matches to be able to go in and say, hey, it's the same thing, and
Mhm.
be able just to pick one and install it.
Or for example, check if the store is blocked, for example, and just install the WinGet one.
Right.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then the next one, um, somebody's like, oh, wingetinstall.net. And I'm gonna cancel this before it completes, but I'm gonna show you the experience. There we go. I don't hit cancel.
Mm. Mhm.
It ends up picking this third party application.
Mm.
That's probably not what somebody wanted.
Mm.
That's because the store source is desperately trying to give me some kind of a result that it thinks is the best match, and this is kind of not really good enough um, from a correlation perspective. So I want to be able to filter out things that WinGet knows, this really isn't the best match. It makes sense if I'm doing search. It doesn't really make sense if I'm doing install.
Mhm.
Um, the next one I'm looking at, there's often times where I do a search for something and the results end up where the Microsoft Store shows up as the top result, but the WinGet community repository ends up as the second result. Looking at flipping the order of those things. Um, and then I'm also looking at that resume command as something I think we want to have for the February release. So that's just a little bit of a sneak peek into what I'm thinking for the roadmap.
Cool. Mhm. And for October, we can expect the fonts to be inside. Nice.
So October, I'm expecting we will have font support. The
Mhm.
only ones we'll probably have in the community repository are the nerd fonts and the
Mhm.
accessibility font by Microsoft.
Mhm.
But you'll be able to add fonts to your private sources and do however many of them you want. It's just a matter of I want to get the client rolled out to most devices before we start adding that font source. Make sure we've got that group policy available as well.
Mhm.
Something else brand new, I didn't really get into it. It's an AI thing.
Mm.
The latest preview of WinGet actually includes an MCP server.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So if you run WinGet MCP with that preview build that's out on GitHub, you'll get the JSON code that you need to fill into your MCP client.
Mhm.
And then the WinGet MCP tool will do fun things like you can say, hey, can you install PowerToys for me? And WinGet will know how to check and see what is a valid package ID. Is it already installed? Those kinds of things. I think we already had our first bug filed by a community member yesterday, which is literally the day after we did the preview. So that's pretty exciting. Um, don't know when this is really going to be done and really going to be a stable GA kind of a thing. But we're working in that direction. We got a lot of feedback that people wanted to have an
Nice.
MCP server in
Mhm.
WinGet as a tool to be able to help find and install packages.
So you can use it inside of VS Code, inside of Olama, inside of anything that you want that has a JSON file where you can provide this stuff.
Yep.
Nice.
I know right now it does not work on ARM devices. There's an interesting little bug. We're working on getting that fixed in the next preview.
Mhm.
But on x64 devices, it works great. I just happen to be on an ARM 64 device right now, and
Okay. Mm.
it will run correctly.
Um, what uh, what tools does it offer? So you
There's a
did already
tool for
install. Is it there a list or is there a
there's a
configure and
find
so?
package. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
there's a find package tool
Mhm.
that will basically take whatever value the model thinks it's trying to search for and feed that into WinGet, and then WinGet will respond back with a list of package IDs that the model can then query and evaluate. And then there
Mhm.
is a separate install tool. And the
Okay.
way we've designed it, we essentially want to use the search tool before the install tool, so that you don't have the model attempting to hallucinate an invalid package ID.
Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. Cool. Nice.
We will also look at partnering with the PowerShell team on a tool for DSC, and maybe one in WinGet as well, to help with configurations. We did kind of a hackathon, a really cool example. Had an intern named Gavin that did some really cool work and had an example wired up that was, hey, I want to have you build me a configuration for, designing and building a game in Unity. And the tool went out, looked at what common developer tools would be used for Unity. It included things like Git, Visual Studio, VS Code, the Unity engine, and some of the popular extensions. It kind of went back and forth. And then it was, hey, build me this configuration file, and it actually built the configuration file out. And then it was like, oh, hey, wait a minute, I'd rather use Notepad++ as my text file editor instead of VS Code. It was able to make that substitution, and it actually generated a completely valid configuration file that was able to run.
Nice.
So out of that hackathon project, we're looking at doing some things like that to help with configuration and building configuration files.
That's nice. Sounds really cool. Cool. Good. I think if there is not anything else to add, I think the Thomas or Christoph, I think, is the other one. I think we don't have anything to add, correct? Any questions? I will look at the chat one last time because I think we only have 2 minutes. I don't want to waste, or no, not to waste, because you are at the start of your day. So I think you have something else to do than being here, I think. So.
Well, this is more fun than doing a bunch of that stuff, but
okay, nice. Thank you very much for this. Do you make it to Minicon? Because Minicon,
I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it to Minicon. I might do a cameo in Steve's presentation if I can get the time free.
Okay, nice. Okay, yeah, because it's my birthday on the 14th.
Nice.
Yeah. I was very, very happy when they laid it on this date. Cool. Okay, good. If there is nothing else, and I think we don't have any other questions or so, then Demitrius, thank you for taking the time to speak and to answer our questions, or my questions mostly. See you.
You bet. Thank you.
See you, the other one. See you next month. And Demitrius, hope to see you next year. Here's con for you if you're not running to the Minicon. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, or have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.